Please enjoy this uninterrupted episode brought to you by CourseDog. CourseDog is the intelligent academic operations platform, unifying how higher ed manages scheduling, curriculum, catalog, assessment, and more. Built on a layer of actionable analytics and seamless integrations with every major SIS and LMS, CourseDog is where academic operations drive student success. To learn more, please go to coursedog.com. That's COURSEDOG.com.
Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to EdUp on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. This is Dr. Joe Salustio, and why am I laughing is because before we even started recording this episode, we already had a whole podcast with our guest. A whole podcast. We could put out 2, and maybe we will. But I said, you got to stop giving us all this goodness. We got to start getting this on recording because it's so good. The content's so great. With me again, I think for the second time with me, is my guest co-host. I think it's the second time with me. Ladies and gentlemen, here she is. She's Bridget Moran. She is Senior Content Manager at CourseDog. Bridget, how are you?
Hello, Joe. Yeah, happy to be here. I was just telling Joe before we hit record, I just moved across the country. So, we made it. We're here. And yeah, thrilled to be.
That's a kind of well, when you have to move, it's a lot.
It is. Would not recommend, but it's always great to be in a new place as well.
Bridget, we have a able, talkative, passionate guest with us today. I want to get her in right away because there's no chance that I can let her talk anymore without the record button being pressed. Ladies and gentlemen, here she is. She's Dr. Arlene Rodriguez. She's Provost and Vice President of Academic and Student Affairs at Middlesex Community College. Arlene, how are you?
I'm doing well, Joe. I'm very excited. We're talking about a topic I love, so it's easy to do. It really is. So thank you.
Well, we want to hear first, set the stage for us. Middlesex Community College, where are you? Who do you serve, and how do you serve them?
Sure, great. We are Middlesex Community College in Massachusetts. There are several Middlesex Community Colleges, but we are in Massachusetts. We have 2 campuses, one in Bedford, Massachusetts, and one in Lowell. So we cover Middlesex County, which is in the northeast corner, about 30 miles away from Boston. On paper, it should be a 45-minute drive. In reality, it could be up to 3 hours with all the traffic, but it's a wonderful place to be situated as a community college, really focusing on workforce because of all of the industries that are located here in the 495-128 corridor. We serve very diverse populations. Our Bedford campus, which was our first campus, started about 52 years ago, is in what one would expect in a New England college. It is bucolic. It is in a suburban community. And it was our original campus started. It was an old Marist seminary. And then in 1987, there was a gap. We saw a gap in the area where students in Lowell, which is within our service area, the city of Lowell, were not being served. And transportation being what it was, they weren't be able to go to Bedford or go to the other community college 9 miles away. So we opened up a campus here in Lowell. We serve about 10,000 students, very diverse population and becoming more diverse population. If you look at our demographics for Middlesex County in Massachusetts, it's one of the few counties that's actually gaining in population in Massachusetts. And the 2 groups that are contributing to that, both through birth and immigration, are Asians and Hispanics. And you see that in our student population. For the past 7 years, we've been in Anapeasy School. That is a federal designation for Asian American, Native American, and Pacific Islander students. And we are an emerging Hispanic institute with about 20 to 21% of our students identifying as Hispanic. But even if you look at those groups, you see great diversity within them. I don't know if any of you know, but Lowell has the second largest Cambodian population in the United States, the first one being Long Beach, California. So our Asian population, while predominantly Cambodian, is also Laotian and Vietnamese and South Asian, India, and Pakistan. And our Hispanic community is very, very diverse. I've worked at HSIs before, and usually you had one group dominate. I was in a town in Springfield, and that was predominantly Puerto Rican. Here, it's everyone: Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, Colombians, Ecuadorians. So it's a very rich environment in terms of culture and diversity, and that provides great opportunity for us to serve them. And how do we serve them? Well, a couple of things we really do focus on is through our NPZ grant and some work that we do. You've heard the phrase before, wraparound services, but making
Yep.
sure that we have advisors, making sure that we have embedded tutors. We have a very successful supplemental instruction program and tutoring program that's credited by one of the national creditors for tutors. And our students are the ones, they're peer tutors. They're not professionals. We did have professional programs, but we realized students really get a lot out of talking to other students. So we do a lot of support in that respect, a lot of wellness and counseling. Certainly that is something post-COVID we've seen increase. And like many other schools, provide essential needs through food pantry, housing databases, and other programs to support our students. But I would say we have strong faculty who are committed, really committed to teaching here and being in a community college. I think, for those of us who have taught at community colleges, the diversity in the classroom, the experiences that students bring into the room make for richer learning. And it really makes for better teaching, because you've got to be creative if you've got all these learners in the room. So we do a lot with serving the health industry and IT industries within this corridor. We have one of the oldest biotech programs that I'll say we started during COVID. I know a lot of schools didn't start things, but Middlesex started a learn and earn program where our biotech students who took certain number of courses were then eligible for an internship at Pfizer, Moderna, all the companies that were really working on the vaccine. They became biotechnicians and were earning $20,
Nice.
$30 an hour while going to school. So we're expanding that. That is one of our goals long term, because we know that for community college students, they work. They have to work. Many of them are older. And even if they were 20 or 21, which is, I guess, more in the traditional age range, they're still working. So how can we get them working in the industry they want to be early, not as an internship at the end of their studies, but as early as possible. And we've been really successful with that. So that's a lot of ways that we serve them. But I think, it is about making sure that we are giving our students what they need, when they need it, so that when we do get to commencement and we see them walk across the stage, everyone is cheering, because we know what it took for that student to get that associate's degree, to get that nursing degree, to get that communications degree. We know what it takes, and it's exciting to be a part of that story.
I'm going to pass it to you, Bridget, but I have one quick question, and you mentioned it at the start before we started recording, and then I'm sort of bringing it forward, but we were talking about your title, and you're the VP of Academic and Student Affairs, which isn't necessarily unique, but it's also not typical, because we see, sometimes it's academic affairs is over here and student affairs is over here. Sometimes it's its own pillar. Sometimes it reports into enrollment. Sometimes it's into academics. Sometimes it's separate. And so every institution has sort of a different structure, or some similarities, but differences. And you're passionate. You said, there's a synergy here. And I would love you to hit on that synergy, because I think it's going to weave really nicely into Bridget's questions. I have a feeling.
Okay. No, it is one of the reasons I came to Middlesex. I had a similar position at another college, and I saw firsthand that synergy. And I'm really thankful that with my team, we've been able to recreate it. You're absolutely right, Joe. Sometimes you'll have the two separate, and sometimes they merge because of finance issues.
Right.
And it's not really, strategic or intentional. Finance is important, obviously, but how do you bring the philosophies together? You have one group that is very much about learning content and very much about pedagogy, and the other group well-versed. You got my experts in student development. How can we bring them together so that they're not pointing fingers at each other, or that they feel their mission is different? Honestly, their mission's the same. It is to support the student, give them what they need in order to earn that credential. A student's not going to look at one of my deeds and say, that's academic affairs. They're not going to know the answer to that, or that's the wrong dean. A student sees, I need help, and who can get me that help. And what I appreciate, this is possible because of really strong deans that I have who know their areas very well, know pedagogy and teaching, and are really open to learning and having conversations with student affairs. My dean of students, likewise, gets engaged with conversations about a new nursing program. For example, we're looking at a practical nursing program. He'll look at the curriculum and say, you know what, this might be the problem. He oversees a lot of the support areas, tutoring. And so he might say, all right, we're going to have to beef up our tutoring in this because now we're going to have more sections of let's say calculus. So he's like, okay, we've got to make sure that we start having conversations about how do we prepare. And he's able to do that directly because he's in the room. It's not somebody got to go tell him and call him. And he engages in conversations around that. That has made so much, allowed us to be much more creative, allowed us to correct things before they got to a particular committee for approval, and allowed, I have a fairly new in their career staff. And I look at my role at this point, like, how can I mentor them? This is a great way for them to be able to learn both sides of this part of the house. So and I have enrollment, which to me is everybody's concern. You don't have to have the enrollment hat that says, I've got to worry about the numbers. No, we're all going to talk about the numbers, and we're going to wonder why are they going in a particular direction? Not just, we don't have the conversation just because they might be declining. Here in Massachusetts, a couple of years ago, we began a free community college program, and
that's Mass Connect, isn't it?
That's Mass Reconnect.
Mass Reconnect. Sorry.
Yeah. The first one was Mass Reconnect was for those 25 and over, and then everyone was calling and saying, "I'm 24." Or, how do we expand that? And now we have Mass Educate, which covers all students going back who don't have, there's their regulations. I'm being very broad about it. I mean, their criteria.
I interviewed Noe Ortega not too long ago and got the whole download.
He gave you the details, and I love it because it means that barrier of funding, that barrier that might send someone to say, I can't do this, take that off the table, and we see that they can do it. They know that they can do it. So having enrollment there to then keep us on our toes about when is it coming down, what is happening, what are the numbers. It's been really exciting to have conversations around that, not just, programming. Programming is going to be linked to funding. All of them are going to be linked to student development. And so it really allows us to create, I know we use the phrase wraparound services a lot, but it's truly wraparound because we're all there at the table, including, I just want to add a plug for our IR department, because without the data, we wouldn't be able to have a lot of those conversations.
Bridget.
Yes, Arlene, I love all of this. And I think it really kind of speaks to your holistic view of the institution, which I think is so great. And, I think part of that is definitely that community engagement piece. I think you touched on that a little bit earlier, particularly talking about, partnering with some of those employers, making sure students are getting those internships. And, I think that sometimes that's one of the more well-known aspects of that engagement piece with community college, right? That workforce labor development. But I know that there are probably so many other ways that you're partnering with your community outside of just that workforce development. So I would love if you could tell us a little bit about that. What other ways are you partnering with the community? What might the public not know about that they should know about?
Sure. A couple of things. We have a whole department related to civic engagement and civic learning. That has been critical, especially with regard when elections are coming around and informing students. And they do a great job working with the community, working with the League of Women Voters, working with the city to make sure that there's information around issues and engaging students in that. Our student clubs are engaged throughout the city of Lowell and through Bedford, but a lot in the city of Lowell. Many of them are affinity-based groups, so they are working and participating in the cities. Well, for example, we have an Asia Club of our Asian students, and Lowell hosts every year an annual Asian American Film Festival, and they are engaged with that outside of an internship model. This is, the clubs coming together to do that work. And I think that's really expanded the role of the college within the community. We do volunteer work with the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Lowell. We're expanding that to include staff as well, not just students. And so it's really our goal at Middlesex is engaging with the community in really relevant, significant ways, but throughout the students' time here. And sometimes it's workforce related as a learn and earn program and doing a paid internship at one of our companies. Sometimes it's project based. We may have we have a wonderful chair of our communications department who can tap into the film industry in Massachusetts, television and film industry in Massachusetts, and be able to engage her students in some of the work there. Now, it may not be that long-term internship of working at Pfizer as a biotechnician, but it's still, again, exposing students not just to workforce, but to the creativity and be able to step into something our students will not have contacts with, will not have the connections to. And I think that's really significant. In addition to the club work, in addition to, the longer term internships, those smaller project-based moments that we can help and support the community, be it helping with a city department's Facebook page, or working on some other social media aspect for a local company. It does two things. It's connecting the student to a community where they live in a different way, but also teaching them the skills of a potential job and positioning them in really developing their identity as going from student to maybe social media expert or social media developer, or just a member of the community who's going to help with, and we have been working on this, developing a curriculum for Asian American studies. How do we engage the students and the community in that, and having students tell some of their stories. We have a generation of Cambodian students whose parents and grandparents were refugees of the Khmer Rouge. And how do we capture those stories? So we really want to make sure that as we move forward, and I love your question, Bridget, because the workforce training is great, but what does a workforce? If I were an employer, and there's studies on this, what do you want? You want a well-rounded individual who can communicate, who can write, who can work well with others. My academic affairs people can take care of the content knowledge. It's these other opportunities that engage students and help them to really identify as that person.
And I love that exposure piece too, right? I think, especially, getting older, me and my friends have this conversation all the time. We're like, we had no idea these careers even existed. We didn't even know this was, a possibility when we were in college. So just being able to know that's out there, I think is so huge. And I really, really love that a lot.
I know there's a study somewhere that I read and I'm forgetting, but to your point, we are training students for jobs that may not exist and they're going to be developed. So how do you develop those skills? How do you develop that drive to learn, which is going to carry them through every single economic up and down? It's one of those things that we really hone in. Like there will be, we've all lived through recessions and, housing crisis, all this stuff. But what are the skills that got us from job to job? And how did we create that confidence and identity in being that learner who's going to be able to be resilient through all these changes? And that's through community work. That's through, I would even say that's through, marching in civic parades or Pride. It's Pride Month. So we're all mapping out our Pride parades and who's going to go to which parade. Because it's what's creating that identity. It's that you're not just a student. And we both know this. We all know this, that for that student to click on the application and submit, for that student to walk into the office, that is scary because you have no idea what's going to happen. You know, we that to me is the boldest moment, because you're saying, I need to change. I got to do something differently. Something prompted this, but I don't know where anything is. I don't know who I should talk to. I'm going to be meeting new people. And so how do we create that environment to say, you know, we're going to get you through this, and how do we create those opportunities for that growth? We use the phrase belonging a lot. I used to love it, and then I'm in that phase where I'm like, okay, too much. I need something else. I don't know what it is, but you know, that idea of belonging gets restarted every single semester, every single class. This idea that like, this is belonging and it's done. No, it's, you know, you're going to just, there was, you know, I was having this great conversation with someone. The minute belonging starts all over again when you don't understand something in class, because if you don't understand a concept in your calc class, you're going to ask, can I do this? Do I belong? So making sure that we know that we have to recreate that all the time and keep that in mind. It's not a one and done. We love swag at Middlesex. We've got tons of it. I have a whole wardrobe. I can go a month wearing Middlesex swag, and I love it. But it's that plus the culture that really makes the significant change and develops that individual. And the exposure, as you said, it's the exposure to the things they may not have had while they were living here before they stepped on campus.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. And I think the belonging conversation is really interesting when you think about it restarts over, excuse me, every term. But I also imagine every touch point they have at the university, right? It's not just the students they meet or the instructors they meet, but also, you know, the different processes that they have to go through, whether that's registration or being able to find the course catalog or whatever it happens to be. So I would love for you to share, you know, how do you think about that from the more operational perspective? How do you make sure that you're infusing equity into those aspects of the college?
Sure, great question. And I will say again, just a plug for having the two areas together, because they're all within my area, and we're able to learn and have professional development together around that issue. When I arrived here, my predecessor had just started, and it's something I believe in and are expanding, is working with the Pedagogy of Real Talk, which is a book and a concept by Dr. Paul Hernandez, who was a colleague of mine. He was at another community college nearby. And it is about the idea that how do you create, for those moments that you have a student in front of you, how do you shift away from the old notion that it's transactional? You're here in admissions, you're going to submit your application, you're going to give me your transcript, you're going to sign here, you're going to sign, we're going to get it. How do you move away from checklist transactional culture to a culture that the person who is serving you in the admissions office, and I'm choosing admission because it's usually the first point, says, I'm an alum, or I went to a community college, or yes, this paperwork may look difficult, but we're here to help you. And how do you share, knowing, let me phrase it this way, the student shouldn't be the only vulnerable one in the room. How do you share that vulnerable story that, yeah, when I went to college, I myself, for example, I'll just share, I'm first generation. Neither of my parents, my mother didn't complete high school. My father didn't even step onto high school. He didn't complete grammar school. I stood on every wrong line and, you know, was terrified and, you know, just really anxious about it. But you find that person who shows up and says, let me walk you to where you should be. And that's what we do here through professional development around Pedagogy of Real Talk, this concept. And I'm abbreviating it. It's much more in depth than what I'm saying. It's very, being very abbreviated about it. But this idea of how do you also share those stories? Let the student know if you're an alum. Let the student know, you know, that it's okay to be nervous, but we're here. We have got your back. We got you. We're going to be taking care of you. You know, sharing those personal stories. If the student is afraid because they have childcare and they're worried about childcare, and that person in the financial aid office is like, yep, we know that. It's okay. A lot of us, I went through that as well. how do you connect those moments to bond through personal stories? Because those moments are short, but they could be really significant. And so we've been hosting professional development using the framework from Pedagogy of Real Talk. And I would say it has really transformed the specific departments really working on it, which is most of my enrollment services, has transformed. It's no longer transactional. It is about building relationships in the time you have the student there. We have faculty do it as well, and they see a significant change. I think there's this old notion, and certainly I went through it when I was in college, that you have to know everything. It wasn't about learning. It was just about showing off that you knew everything already. You never admitted that you didn't know something, or you didn't. I was an English major. You didn't admit you didn't read something. And it's just a different way of learning. It's a more organic way of learning, and it's really, as you noted, creating that sense of belonging at every given point. But that's been huge for us. That really has been a huge change. It's given us a common language around how we work together. I see it change the relationship between staff members. I love stories. I studied stories. The impact that a story being told goes on forever for me. And just being able to share those stories with students, with staff, to be able to say, yeah, I get it. It's, I understand what you're going through, and listening really well. Just share and listen.
Arlene, I think you'll appreciate this. And so a long time ago, my dissertation was based on the psychological contract theory, which originated in hiring practices, where you said when you get hired, you sort of had this unwritten contract, psychological contract, where the employer is going to protect you. If you're in you have safety, you have all of these things around you, and if that's breached, if that contract is breached, I leave. I'm going to leave my employer. And I wrote it in the context of a student-faculty relationship or student-administrator relationship, because to your point, when we can get alignment from all of our administrators and staff that what I do next, when a student's in front of me, what I say or do next is literally going to either enhance trust, or it's going to give the student the justification, some level of justification in their mind, to take it and go, you know what? I didn't think I could do this from the beginning, and now this interaction with this person has convinced me I can't do it. And the power that we all wield individually, and we don't think it. Sometimes we think it's just admissions, or it's the advisors that have this magic power to retain students. And it literally could be the person at the convenience store who's checking you out, or it could be the maintenance person that sprays grass all over your brand new white sneakers because you were walking by and didn't like literally the power that we all wield, because the fragility of the student journey for most students, it's so fragile. And we've talked about where that bumper, getting hit on your way to school, having somebody rear end you on your way to school, and all of a sudden I've got this $200 bill to fix my bumper, and this little scratch has given me every reason to go, you know what, I just can't do it this month. And then next month turns into 6 months, turns into a year, and so on. And I think we sometimes forget that one of the biggest roles we have as somebody who works in an institution, that's in any department, is that we're building confidence 24/7. We're building confidence for the student. We're saying, you can do it. No matter what service is going back and forth, at the end, we're going, you got this, right? And that's like this hidden message. And without that hidden message, the students will disappear.
Absolutely. You've made so many wonderful points, because I love the fact the realization is, like, for community college students, a bump, a rear end, a fender bender, that's it. That's a sickness. A sick child can wreck a savings account, if there is a savings account. And so, absolutely. And we intersect at different points of our days. You don't know what went on in my day right before this.
Right.
And, but it's like, how do we engage start all over and really engage, no matter what went on between the hours before I got here. But same with the student. The student, is not responsible for whatever happened before. And likewise, how do we engage the student to make sure that they know they are cared for, that there is care here and genuine respect to help them grow and develop into that goal that they came here with. It's part of our, I use your term, it's part of our contract. If you're telling me I'm coming here because I want to be a nurse, hi, I'm in the middle of something.
The day job of a provost.
The day job. You didn't see me on the side going, no. It's like frantic.
Don't come in the office right now. She's busy.
So I apologize for that. But no, I want to tell a quick story because it is a contract. So I want to go back to that. It is a contract that we have with students. If they're coming in saying, I want to be a nurse, if they come in saying, whether they go into nursing or whether they go into another path, what they're saying is, I need you to help me for the next period of my life. How can you transition me to that next period? Because I need to go there, and we are going to bring them there. It's you need someone to care. And I know that's an overused word, but I want to share a quick story. I worked at an institution where, and I'm not sure what the regulation is about whether or not this was quote unquote legal or not, but we can decide. When the cafeteria closed, there would be leftovers. And the woman who ran the cafeteria would package them up in styrofoam containers and hand them out to any students who were there. And she's like, here, if you're hungry now, you could save it for dinner for free. She just would hand out these meals. But it wasn't just handing out free food. She sat down with them and said, what are you studying? What are you doing? What's your name? My name is Jody. And she got to know them. And I know that someone who gave food and just said, are you studying? Are you passing? How's your math class? How's your science class? Made a difference to students in the positive way. And that, if there were something in a retention chart, there's a Jody line, there's a line for that of how she helped retain students. And I think that's, it's critical that we remember that when students come in, you're absolutely right. They're fragile. They're scared. They're wondering what's going to happen. How much is this going to cost me? Now in Massachusetts, we have free community college, but, not everyone is eligible for that. There's still financial FAFSA, the Pell Grants. How do you fill those out? How do you ask a parent if you're a dependent for tax returns? There's a lot of anxiety, but it is so critical to make sure that we understand that as we hire, we're hiring people who have that compassion and thinking and know that their goal is to make sure we educate these individuals. And this, Bridget, you know this, community college students stay in the area. They're from the area. They stay in the area. They're not from some other state coming here and then leaving and going elsewhere. They are our community. And like I said, we're very lucky in this corner of Massachusetts. We're in the northeast corner of Massachusetts with a ton of industries looking for people to hire. We've all read about, that gap, that industries are begging for. Some industries. Healthcare is always looking for nurses. IT is looking for workers. Biotech is looking for technicians. How do we make sure that those jobs we're preparing the community, those individuals within the community who are going to stay in the community for those jobs?
Wow, you're just bringing back so many memories for me, Arlene. Honestly, right now, I'm thinking about one of the cafeteria workers at my college, Beth. Everyone loved her. They'd be like, oh, like Beth's working today. She's going to say hi to us. Like, just it brightens up your day. It really does make a difference. So I love that so much.
Yeah, it's when the culture in the school is just right that way, it just makes for a brighter community for everybody. Because I as provost want to come in because I know someone. I love working with these individuals, and students are going to get a sense of that. They're going to get that sense of, if this is a place that really cares and wants to make sure they succeed, then we're here we also like being with each other and feeling comfortable walking right into the provost's office, because it's not the provost, it's Arlene, and or leaving a can of orange soda because that's the only soda that Arlene drinks. Once we know things like that, it just creates that community that we're able to spread to the students.
Yes, absolutely. And I know, I think we spent a lot of time talking about kind of the culture we create at an institution and how that's so important. But I think there's also that, maybe a less exciting topic of what goes on behind the scenes, right? So I think we've talked a lot about, making sure that we're very equity minded at an institution. And I think, of course, there's an important role of data there, right? Making sure that we're identifying where the gaps are, looking at how our initiatives are doing. So I would love your perspective on this. What data sources should institutions be investing in to make sure that they're getting this right? I think there are a lot of conversations out there right now. At the federal level, some of these, data collection services, research apparatuses are in question. So what can institutions be doing right now to make sure that, they're kind of future proofing themselves so they still have access to this great data to be making good decisions?
That's a great question. And I think I've been very lucky to have a data team that when we hired them, we asked them equity-minded questions, so that they were already knowledgeable or at least really looking to learn about how to do this. We have been working with Helio Campus and developing a data pool and pulling data from different sources. But I think for me, a couple of things that we brought in more recently, and I say more recently, meaning in the past 6 years or so, has been disaggregating data and really being significant about what are the characteristics and, certainly race, gender, and ethnicity, making it legible, as I say, to everybody, so that if anyone looked at the graph, they were able to understand it. And really we've developed dashboards so that we can everyone has access to dashboards for every new initiative. And for us, it's all been critical because that usually, sometimes the history in higher ed has been, I've been doing this for years, but I never assessed it. So really developing the data help us to create that curiosity as to where things are and where a particular initiative is going. I think for us, what's been key is we focused on specific specific metrics that we know move the needle. We have 15 of them, and then we have dashboards for each of the 15, and we have data summits every year around making to look at the data, discuss, and these are discussions led by our IR office. And it's come to a point that faculty and staff really engage very well with those data. In terms of the protection of the data and making sure, when we move forward and protecting ourselves, given what the day is, a lot of what we've been looking at is how those data really reflect the community. And as a community college, our job is to serve a community. Our community remains a diverse community. We are going to still do that work to make sure students have what they need, to make sure that we're providing equity-minded curriculum, equity-minded services. We're going to continue to do that no matter what we call it, because it is about our community. So one of the things we've been doing recently is using Achieving the Dreams Community Vibrancy Framework, where we do deep dives into every single zip code, doing a lot of zip code studies and breaking it down to specific metrics, such as bachelor's attainment within that zip code, such as salaries, average salaries. Middlesex Community College has, when I keep saying the word diverse, we certainly think race, ethnicity, and gender, but economics, the gap there is huge. You have Lowell, with one of the lower bachelor attainments and lower salaries, but we also cover Lexington and Concord, where you have the average salaries well within the three figures, around 130, 150. And it's a huge gap there. And so the community vibrancy framework allows us to remember the community protect us when we do talk about data and equity, to really point to that this is what we need to do, because these are the data around the community where our students work, where our students live. And so that's how we've been expanding and deepening our equity work, rather in addition to just keeping the internal disaggregation, but really spreading out into the community and using that vibrancy framework to expand our knowledge, expand the work that we need to do, but also make sure that, no matter what comes down in terms of, regulations, we still serve the community. The work still gets done. And no matter what we call it, we will still get that work done.
I love this so much. And, I think getting granular with it too, right? Looking at every single zip code, that's so huge.
The first time we did it, I made the mistake of putting a slide up before I explained it. And it's like pulling children out of the pool. I'm like, no. It's like, it's they're racing. Everything's they're off. I can't do anything now. It's easy to really do the deep dive into it. So it's always important that we kind of pull back and then say, okay, where's the application of these data? How do we use them? Data are meant to be used and informed, not simply just to read and be curious. Whenever anyone says that to me, I'm curious. I'm like, is it actionable? I want something that's actionable. I don't want curiosity is nice, but for the next hour, I need you to be actionable. You can use curiosity on your own time. We get to know the communities. And again, it is a part of deepening our equity work. I see our equity, having started with math and English completion. Everybody has to start with math and English completion. And then expanding it to, second semester, second year, because there's a habit of front loading everything. The first year experience, but I always worry about the second year students. In one institution where I worked, it was fascinating to see how at the end of the first year, men of color did not succeed as well as any other group. Second year, it was women of color. And then men of color ended up surpassing and graduated at a higher rate. So, it's really looking at other years and not just those factors we tend to be, kind of looking at always. But to me, it's important to know, what neighborhood do you live in? It is granular and we're just starting. So we can talk in a year or so how it's going. But it's also a way to kind of, really expand our work, but also protect ourselves.
Arlene, we're gonna go to. I've been toying with this idea of. There's a game that you used to play as a kid. It was like you'd have to. It was like this piece of paper, and you would go like this, and it would say, what kind of car do you drive? A Ferrari, or who are you going to marry, and how many kids you're going to have, whatever. And it got me thinking, like, and I've been thinking about this recently. We interview so many people, but they do so many things. And I was thinking about the job of a provost very quickly. And you have, and it just off the top of my head, I was writing like faculty hiring and unions and contracts and transcripts and commencement and accreditation and programs and class loading, articulations, credit transfer, academic calendars, program versions, which will drive anybody insane, Title IV and institutional research and political and the micro and macro political and ROI and data, and you have all these areas. And it got me thinking, what's fun for you? What's one thing where you go, with this little piece of paper, this is fun, and what's one thing you'd like to just forget doing?
Oh,
hiring. I wish I could just give me the good person at the end. Reviewing resumes and interviewing, I just like, forget it. I don't want to do it. What's fun, and what do you want to forget?
Oh, what's fun? Gosh, so much of this is fun. I think, and I mean that. I mean it's to me, the exciting part is being engaged in all these different roles and mentoring who's already hired, supporting the students. To me, is just exciting. The fun part.
One thing when you just that's fun.
Commencement.
Commencement's fun.
Commencement to me is getting up to commencement can be a little hectic and nerves are frayed, but standing up, I do the names. So and I do it with my academic deans because I always feel they've had a role. And when you lean over and you see the student in their regalia in, polished shoes because they brought special shoes for that to me is fun. Prepping to make sure that commencement is, my voice is as joyful when I say the last name as it was when I said the first name, and that we are still cheering. That to me is fun.
What's one thing you want to ditch? Forget it. I don't want to do that.
Oh. You took hiring, because I used to think hiring was fun, and then you realize, no, it's not. Very soon I learned it's a lot of work and sometimes a little scary. Oh, wow, that's a tough one.
You can take hiring. I mean,
there are these moments. Okay. Something I'm good at, and I learned early that I was good at, I didn't mean to be good at it, but always breaks my heart, is when you have a student who didn't reach their goal. And how do you comfort them when you have angry parent, crying student? Now, I've learned skills to, help, but that always makes me sad. That's the, I'm going to take a walk and a little break afterwards. That's the one where I'm like, I wish I could take a wand and tell you back 6 weeks ago, you need to study more. Or I wish that didn't happen, that you didn't. Or I want to tell you, you may not be suitable for that program, but you're going to find what you're good at. I wanted to be a jazz musician, and I realized there was no way these short little fingers were going to play that piano the way it should be played. And I don't like to stay up late. So I'm like, these are really two things that are not good. But I learned where I found this path. But that to me is the one that if I could give to somebody else, and I have sometimes, but most times I like to do it.
Every one of us has. If you've worked with students before, you know this situation. You've got upset parents or an upset student, and you're there with 2-3 of your colleagues, and you're all strategizing on what's going to do. And somebody goes, "Well, who's going in?" And everybody looks at each other and goes, "I'm not. You go. You go. No, I'm not going. You go." It happened to every one of us.
Every one of us. And when you got title provost, it's like, all right, I got to go in. But that's the worst part of the job. And it's because, what we talked about, we're helping students achieve that goal. We're supporting them. We put all these things in place, but for whatever reason, it's not achieved. Then how do we break the news? And usually someone years ago taught me a phrase. I had a student who was failing a class, and I was young. I was a very brand new teacher. And clearly I was not using the right words. I was all over the place because I'm thinking, you didn't do this paper. That's why, and the realization, I had a colleague come in and say, whenever that happens to me, I just look at them and I say, try again next year. I know you can do this. Try again next year. You can do this. We're here for you. We'll take it. And then I realized that was a wonderful mentor. By the way, the same person who told me community colleges would get in my blood and I'd never want to leave them. That conversation had an impact, because it is about, okay, my role, whether I'm a teacher, a dean, a provost, my role is to uplift the conversation. It's not about scolding. It's not about reminding, deficit thinking of like, you didn't do your paper, you didn't do this lab, you didn't do this. It is about how do you uplift the conversation so that they know that maybe right now they're in this space, but they're not going to be in that space forever. There's still an opportunity. There are always opportunities. Always look up. My mother would always say, look up, look up. There's always something ahead.
Bridget, what'd you think about this convo with our amazing guest?
I loved it. I think that was probably the perfect note that we could end on. I really can't think of anything better.
Well, there you have it, everyone. Since Bridget said I should end the episode, I'm going to do that right now. Ladies and gentlemen, she's your guest today on this podcast, The EdUp Experience. She's Dr. Arlene Rodriguez. She is Provost and Vice President of Academic and Student Affairs at Middlesex Community College. Arlene, thank you for your passion today. It was an amazing job. We hope you had fun, too, talking about your work.
I love talking about my work, so thank you so much for giving me that time.
There you have it, everybody. You've just EdUp'd.
Thank you for listening to this uninterrupted episode brought to you by CourseDog. CourseDog is the intelligent academic operations platform unifying how higher ed manages scheduling, curriculum, catalog, assessment, and more. Built on a layer of actionable analytics and seamless integrations with every major, SIS, and LMS. CourseDog is where academic operations drive student success. To learn more, please go to coursedog.com. That's COURSEDOG.com.